Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today, we're taking a look at the Ice Tank. The Ice Tank's a Warden Ice Staff tank that the Northern Wind was originally designed behind, was being an Ice Staff tank. And I decided I would go back to it and try to make something that is a viable option for Ice Staff tanking. And it took a while to come up with this idea, or to put this idea together, to make it a viable working option. And this is the results. So let's get right into it. So as you can see, we are an Argonian Warden. Argonian will work best for resource management. Ice, the Wood Elf is, or High Elf is actually better for this. Because of their 4% bonus to ice damage and their 10% magicka. They actually work better at this than the Argonian does, but it's really up to the player on how they choose they want to play this build. This particular build is set up with an Argonian in mind. If you're going to play a High Elf, there's another setup I would suggest going with. It's a lot better, and it's a lot smoother. So starting at the top, you can see we have 26k magicka. I know it seems kind of high, guys, but there's a reason for that. It's because most of our abilities are magicka based, so we want to be able to keep our resource management. We want to be able to keep our ability of doing heavy attacks and all this other stuff going while still tanking. So 26k magicka, 35k health. 35k is a good place for a tank to be. You don't have to go higher than this, really. Not unless you want to be just more beefy, like damage-wise, taking damage. Otherwise, you really don't need it. Down here, you're going to see that we have a high spell critical. There's a reason for that, and I'll get to that in a minute. We are running a 2200 spell resist and physical resist on the main bar. On the back bar, we are running 20k, 20k, but that's because we have more ice abilities on our front bar, allowing us to get greater mitigation on that front bar. Moving on. We are running the Lady Mudstone because we are using an ice staff. We don't get extra resistances like from a shield, so you want that extra resistances. So the Lady is better in this sense. We are using Ebon Armory. We do get minor heroism at all times because we are using shulks, and we do are using Tri-Stat food. The Tri-Stat food I would suggest using is any food that's purple, CP 150, and gives you all 3 stats in health, magic, or stamina. Use one of those. I think there's like 4 or 5 different versions of this food, and it's going to work the best. The other food that you can use with this, if you're going for a High Elf, is I would suggest Witch Mother's Potent Brew instead, because you'll still end up with like a 15k stamina. You don't need much more than that. And that's only used for dodge rolling, but that magic recovery you get from Witch Mother's Potent Brew is going to be a lot better for you as a High Elf, because then you can build into recovery. So, and you'll need the recovery, because you won't be blocking like non-stop like you do with a sword and board tank. Alright, so going over the sets now, you can use one of 2 sets here. The main set I like to use is Ice Heart, because Ice Heart gives you a damage shield, and Wardens don't have their own casted damage shield, actual damage shield. So this works out to compensate for having a casted damage shield, because this will proc pretty much non-stop if you keep your abilities going wisely. So we are using a light helm and a medium shoulder for this. The shoulder is sturdy, the helm is infused. This has Tri-Stats, this has max health. Onto the main body 5-piece. This is an easy set to get put together, and that is Ebon Armory. If you get it in body, it's easier to get than it is getting the jewelry and the, like 2 body pieces, because jewelry is hard to get even in dungeons. It's not super hard, but it just takes a lot of runs, where with a set like this, like getting this, you can get it all in one fell swoop almost. So the chest piece you want to get reinforced with Tri-Stats, and as you can see with Ebon Armory, you get max health on the 2 and 3 piece. The 4 piece gives you 4% healing taken, which for an Argonian is great. And then the 5 piece on top of that increases your max health by 1,118 for you and up to 11 other members within 28 meters. So this works in dungeons and trials. Really good set. offers some group support. And yeah, so yeah, we'll just say that. And then reinforced on the chest. On the small pieces, go sturdy. And then on the legs, go infused. You want the helm and the legs to be infused because it's going to give you really good amount of extra resources. But it's the reinforced on the chest is what you really want. You want that 3,215 extra resistances. So moving down to the jewelry, the second set we're using is Shulks. And Shulks is a really good set for a tank, a Magicka tank, especially when you're playing more Magicka based or using a lot more Magicka based abilities, because it gives you max health, it gives you a little bit of spell damage, it gives you a little bit of spell crit, but it grants you minor heroism at all times. So when using an ice staff, this works great because it gives you minor heroism all the time, like whenever you go into combat. So it's just a nice way of getting ultimate without having to use sword and board. Moving on to the weapons, we are using 2 ice staves. The first staff we're using is an infused staff with weakening. This is so you can keep the uptime of weakening a lot easier on your enemies. And I know a lot of people are going to say, why aren't you using Crusher? Well, there's a reason why I chose to go with weakening instead on the ice staff. With an ice staff character, you get a lot more AoE for minor maim. So when you're applying that much minor maim to multiple targets, being able to apply weakening on top of it helps out a ton. So you can keep weakening and minor maim pretty much up about 95% of the time if you're playing the build right. If you're playing the build wrong, it'll be about 65 to 70% of the time. So, alright, moving on to the other one, we are using a charged ice staff. Now you guys are going, but you're a warden, you get this 200% thing to ice. Yes you do, but you don't get it for ice staves. You only get it for the ice abilities the warden uses. So having a charged back bar staff where your wall of elements is going to be better for you, because you're going to be able to keep that wall of elements up and keep that charged effect whenever you use it. So anytime you use your back bar ice staff, you're going to drop that wall of elements, bam, it's going to apply that minor maim a lot easier to multiple targets, because it's gonna place it wherever you place the wall. Any enemies that are standing in that wall of elements are going to get chilled. So that's the other reason why we want it. You can put a frost enchant on this, but it's not advised, because this weakening is going to be better, because the weakening will carry over to the front bar as well. So you have weakening on both bars, so it'll keep a consistency. And weakening helps a lot. Like, weakening plus minor maim can help a lot. A whole lot. We also have a way of applying major maim, too, for 4 seconds. But we're not going to be using it non-stop. We're only going to be using it when we bring enemies to us. But that major maim, along with minor maim, along with weakening, pretty much these guys drop, their damage drops so much, it's like they're not even hurting you. So, but all this is a really good overall setup for an ice staff tank. A warden ice staff tank. So now we're going to move on to the skills. Oh, onto the jewelry real quick. We are running 2 shield play enchants because we will be blocking, but not a whole lot. So you can go recovery on all these instead if you want. You can go 2 recovery here, but I would only suggest doing that if you're playing a high elf. If you're playing a Argonian, go shield play, or any other race besides high elf, maybe a Breton, go recovery. But high elf, definitely want that recovery. And also here you still want the potion cooldown on this one. And this basically allows you to fire a potion almost every 35 seconds. So it gives you greater uptime of getting that potion's resource return. You won't need it much, or shouldn't need it much if you're playing the build properly. Alright, so moving on to the skills. So first off, make sure you get all your class skills. Like, just get them all, because you're going to be using a lot of class abilities for different situations. Different situations are going to call for different things. So getting them all, having them all unlocked is going to be better, more beneficial to you. Destruction staff, get all the passives. Yes, even tri-focus, because you're going to be using this to taunt enemies. And the little minor shield it gives you is pretty nice. Armor side, light armor, you want the top 3 passives, medium armor top 2, and bottom 1. The bottom 1 mainly because of the dodge roll, the 4% extra in dodge roll with the way the CP set up, you're going to need that. Heavy armor, you're going to want all the passives. You can be a vampire with this. I would suggest not, though, because of certain reasons. Unless you were a dark elf, I wouldn't suggest it. Fighter's Guild, intimidating presence, you can take that, but you want to get Banish the Wicked, where you generate 9 ultimate. Mage's Guild, you do want to get Magicka Controller because you are using Inner Light on the back bar, and I'll explain why in a minute. Psijic Order, you can you can use Deep Thoughts. It's probably the better ability to go with, but another one you can use is Time Stop if you don't want to use Deep Thoughts, because Deep Thoughts you're not going to be activating too often. You don't really need the resource return, so Time Stop will work. But remember, this costs a decent chunk of Magicka, so it's like 3k even with this. So yeah, it's almost 4k still. So be careful with it. Undaunted, you want Undaunted Command and Undaunted Metal. You don't need Inner Fire for this build because you do have a ranged taunt built into the Ice Staff, so it makes it, you don't have to worry about it. Close range taunts, you're using your heavy attack as well. Alliance War, don't really need any passives. Argonian, get all the passives, and in crafting alchemy, get medicinal use, and with provisioning, get Gourmand and Connoisseur. This just helps your food last longer. This helps your potions cooldown better, and it the effects last longer. So it makes the effects last longer. So you don't have to the cooldown thing. You don't have to worry about it so much because it's like 45 seconds on this, and then it's 40 seconds like for the time frame for them to last. They last for 40 seconds and it takes 45 seconds. That's why we're using that one enchant for cooldown. So going over the skills on the bar, and I'm going to tell you one skill that you can swap out if you want to. But going over the main bar, Frozen Device is the first ability we're going to have on our bar. This does a portal that summons enemies to you. It's kind of like a trap, so you can place this down. If you know dungeons really well and trials really well, it's really easy. You get used to it. You know where mobs will spawn before they spawn, so you just cast the traps there, and they last for 36 seconds. So that's really nice. It also applies Major Maim to them, and that reduces their incoming damage, or their outgoing damage, by 30%. So it's really nice. You can have 3 of these down at any time. So it's a nice ability to have, and it's cheaper for you to use this to pull enemies than it is to get chains or Silver Leash from Fighter's Guild. And if you need to, you can do that. Like if you're doing another type of setup for a trial or something where you're not pulling, like needing to pull lots of different things, you can use Silver Leash instead, and this will cost you stamina, which saves you Magicka in the long run. So you can use either one, but I prefer this with this build. Next ability on our bar is Gripping Shards. This is a fantastic AoE. It's only around you as the caster, so whenever you use this, it puts ice shards down around you. But it also immobilizes any enemies that are in it for 3 seconds. Any. That means, and I don't know what the cap on it is, but I did a test in both a dungeon and a trial to see, and I ran through like 2 rooms and just gathered up as many mobs as I could in bandaged cells, veteran mode, and just dropped it, and just to see how many it would immobilize, and immobilized every single one of them. So this is a really good ability to have. It also can apply chilled with ease because of the fact the Warden is the only class that has this built into it, and that's Glacial Presence. Glacial Presence increases the chance of applying chill to enemies with Winter's Embrace abilities by 200%. So any ice ability you're using from here that does frost damage has a chance of applying chill, which means they're getting Minor Maim on them. Now that Minor Maim only lasts 4 seconds, but it will get reapplied instantly. So it's kind of a nice trade-off. And you can apply this up to as many targets as you can. The next ability we have on our bar is a self-heal and AoE damage ability, and the reason why we're using this one, Arctic Blast, over the other one, which does a heal for an ally, is 2 reasons. This skill is 100% based off of your max health. Doesn't matter. Both this one and the other one are both based off of your max health. So the higher your health is, the more powerful this ability becomes, damage-wise and with the percentage in healing. Not a lot of people knew that, but yeah. Well, the percentage is healing is beefed up through Blessed, but the actual heal that it gives is your max health. So 10% of your max health it's just really good to have. It's 13% of your max health at first, and then 10% afterwards, which is really good. It's going to be your main survivability skill. This also can apply chilled at a greater rate. It's the same distance as this, so it's an 8-meter range or a 6-meter range around you. So it really allows that CC crowd control master effect. And yes, the chilled from this can be applied to bosses as well. Next ability on our bar is Shimmering Shield. Now, Shimmering Shield, the thing you have to know about Shimmering Shield is based off of two things. Max health, and there's one of your passives, and it's not Bastion. But I'm just going to show you guys real quick what happens when I buff myself with, because I can buff my health up by 10%. So now you can look at it and it goes up to 66,000 because I boosted my health to 37k, and this ability actually went up in damage, and this ability actually goes up in damage. So it's not just a matter of damage, it's a matter of applied effect, all that kind of stuff. But the damage does play nice with this build. So you can solo play a lot more things with this than you can, say, a regular tank. Because you got so many abilities that are based off of max health, and not just weapon damage and stamina or spell damage or max magicka and stuff. Now, max magicka will not apply to Arctic Blast or gripping shards. Now, if you're using the other ice ability that can be placed, that's based off of max magicka. This one is based off of max health. So, and so is this. Just so you guys know. So all three of these are based off of max health. But this one here is a really good one. It'll block 3 projectiles, totaling out in 61,000 damage total. So it'll absorb up to 61,000 damage total from your enemies and projectiles. So that means any spell cast at them that's a projectile, any arrow shot at them is a projectile. And what it does is it removes 1 shield, gives you major heroism for 6 seconds, granting you 3 ultimate for 1.5 seconds. It lasts for 9 seconds, so you get 3 ultimate for throughout that 9 seconds. It also restores magicka every time a shield is removed. So it's a really good trade-off there. But the ultimate gen's nice. The next ability we have on our bar is Deep Thoughts. Now, Deep Thoughts, like I said, you can change this out with something else if you want to. You can even put Vigor here if you wanted to. It's not going to work that well, but if you wanted to put it here, you could. But this is basically a resource return. But the main reason why we have Deep Thoughts here is for this. See how when I'm blocking, I get a 5,800 point shield? You really want that up. That ability, because that's going to give you a great way to do that. Now, whenever you're channeling Deep Thoughts, because of the passive, you also get 30% damage reduction. So, it's really good. And that's the passive from the Psijic Order skill line. Both of them are passives. Concentrated Barrier, which allows you to have a damage shield, and it lasts for 10 seconds. So, alright, it stays with you until the shield wears off. When the shield wears off, it takes 10 seconds of you not blocking to get it back. The next ability we have is Deliberation. This one, while you're casting a channel or channeling a Psijic Order ability, you gain major protection, reducing your damage taken by 30%. And we'll get into why this is a good thing for them. The next ability we have is mainly here for 2 reasons. 1, it increases your max magicka, and 2, it's a great group support AoE. And that is Northern Storm. Northern Storm does really good damage, but we're not here for the damage. We're here for what it does group-wise. Group-wise, you and your nearby allies gain major protection, reducing your damage taken by 30% while slotted. While you have minor maim and weakening on the enemies, if you have major protection on you and your group, you're not even taking enough damage to do anything. So it's a really great ability. Like if you're dungeon playing, I use Northern Storm all the time. When I'm in trials, I will use Warhorn. Alright, so moving on to the back bar. Back bar is an interesting one. There's two options for this ability, guys. There's two morphs. I chose to use Elemental Drain because this takes a little bit of stress off the healer. It allows the healer to use a few more abilities that gives them more freedom. So this Elemental Drain puts Major Breach on their enemy, and with playing a Magicka-based character, you have no way of applying Major Fracture at all. So if you're playing this in a group, make sure your group is made up mostly of Magicka characters in order for this to work out really well. If you're playing with a Stamina character, ask them to run Night Mother's Gaze so they can apply Major Fracture for themselves. And yes, you can get away with it. You can run that in Reliquin and be fine. The DPS is great, in fact. So this allows you to apply that Major Breach, which reduces enemy spell resistance by 5,280. It also applies minor Magicka Steal for 24 seconds, which causes you and your allies to restore 300 Magicka every second when you're dealing damage to them. And you gotta think, you're dealing damage every second no matter what because of all your AoEs. The next ability we have on our bar is Blockade of Frost. This one, slam your staff down to create a ice barrier. This does basically immobilizes the enemies really well. It allows you to chill them and immobilize them. Now remember, you can chill a lot of enemies. So you're going to be applying the chilled status effect a lot, because not only can your ice abilities do that, but your Ice Heart Helm set can also apply chilled. Your class abilities can apply chilled a lot easier, and then your ice staff can apply chilled. So this is why we have the charge staff on the back bar, is for this. You can use a charge staff on the front bar, but it doesn't really help. Like, it doesn't help at all. Like, it's better to keep it infused with weakening. Next ability we have is Lotus Blossom. Lotus Blossom, now this one you can swap out if you want to. I have two abilities here unlocked, or another ability locked besides Lotus Blossom. I just prefer Lotus Blossom because it allows me to do a group heal. Well, it allows me to group heal as well as heal myself if need be, because it applies a buff to me that allows me, anytime I do a light or heavy attack, I heal a person for a certain amount of health for 20 seconds, and it also gives me major proficiency at no cost, no use of a potion, and that allows me to boost my spell critical, which makes my Ice Heart proc a lot better. Now, the other monster set that you can use instead of Ice Heart is Lord Warden. Lord Warden is the best set to use with this build, because one, it's going to give you a lot more resistances, makes your survivability a lot more. So Lord Warden is the set I would suggest using, but with that kind of setup you're going to be blocking more, so it's better to go Sword and Shield. On the next ability, we have Ice Fortress. Now, Ice Fortress has an 8-meter range around you, so anyone standing within 8 meters of you, when you cast this, will get Major Ward and Major Resolve along with yourself, and you can apply that up to as many targets as you want, because it is considered an AoE spell. So that means if you're in a group of 20 in Cyrodiil, and you cast this ability, and they're all stacked up around you, all 20 people should get it. Because I have not seen a cap on this in trial play. Because I had all 12 stand on me, I cast it, everyone got it. So if it's a max of 12, but they did remove the AoE cap, so it applies to multiple targets. So they might have done it with this too, because this is considered for some reason an AoE spell. So it gives everyone within an 8-meter radius Major Ward, Major Resolve, but it also grants you minor protection, reducing your incoming damage by 8%. This stacks with some stuff in your CP, and I'll show you guys when we get there why this is so good with as much damage reduction as this build has already. Next up is Inner Light. Inner Light's a great ability for that the Max Magicka Major Proficiency. That's mainly why we have it, is to get that Max Magicka increase by 7%, because we do have Magicka Controller from the Mages Guild, plus this 5%, that's a 7%. So when we swap bars, if you watch my Magicka, it doesn't change but by 200 not even 200. So it's good to have that ice inner light on the back bar for that purpose, so you don't lose as much magicka. Otherwise, otherwise it goes down to like 24k. And you can give up Northern Storm if you want to, and this ability. It's up to you. And you can replace them with other things if you feel it's necessary, like Blue Betty. And Blue Betty is another ability that I do suggest you either have it available or you use it whenever you can. Because this, in replacement of this, is really good. And the other reason why I don't like using Blue Betty is the amount of magicka you get back versus the amount of magicka you get from this, and the amount of magicka you get from other things, from potions, heavy attacks, it's just easier to manage your resources than having Blue Betty cast every 27 seconds, because it can take up a lot. But this is an instant cast, and it does remove a negative effect. So I would suggest, if you're going to set this up with a setup where you're not going to use Northern Storm or this ability, then I would put Blue Betty on the back bar and keep it there. But if you're doing a dungeon where you need it, like you need to remove negative effects, or you're doing a trial, then I would swap out this with Blue Betty. Because then it saves you more magicka. Next on our bar is Aggressive Warhorn. Everyone should have known this. This is any tank's go-to ability. But basically what it does, it allows you to cast a buff on everybody that increases their max health, magic, and stamina by 10% for 30 seconds, and it grants your group major force, increasing your critical damage, or their critical damage, everyone's, by 15% for 9.5 seconds. So it's one you're going to want to keep up a lot. Anytime it's on cooldown, this is the ability. Why we use it in trials, all that kind of stuff, is because it just does so much more. Now, because it does grant minor toughness, you will already have it from being a Warden. From this ability, I think it's right here. Yep. When you heal yourself or an ally, you grant the target minor toughness, increasing their max health by 10%. So this is a really beneficial thing. Now, if you are going to take inner light off your bar and do like I said, and you're going to put these abilities here, I would suggest here removing this and going with the green balance, and going with this one here. Enchanted Forest, because this is going to give you 20 ultimate whenever you heal anybody below 50% health. And it's up constantly, so you can pretty much keep this up all the time. A lot better than you can Warhorn. And in fact, I would almost say it's better than having Warhorn. But that's just my opinion, because you can keep this up all the time. With as much ultimate chin as you have with the shulks, the shimmering shield, all that stuff, you're just going to be removing stuff like crazy. So now we're going to go over CP real quick. And with the CP, understand I have a specific setup for a reason. First off, in Ironclad we have 56 points. This reduces your incoming damage, direct damage, by 20%. Direct damage, a lot of people don't realize really understand what direct damage is, because devs haven't really explained it. But direct damage is anything that's hitting you directly. Now, I've done a test on this to find out what direct damage, what all abilities represent direct damage. Any AoE, anything that says area of effect damage, does not count as direct damage. Area of effect damage is counted in Thaumaturge only. Like, that's where a big portion of its damage is calculated. Ironclad does not reduce that damage. It reduces damage from light and heavy attacks. It reduces damage, and only in certain, I don't know, it doesn't always work against light and heavy attacks, but it works enough. But it does work a lot against, like, direct damage ability. Like, when you see those enemies that hit you with those cone effects, that's a direct damage ability. When you see those enemies that use an ability that hits you directly, like their stab ability or backstab, that's a direct damage ability. There's a lot of different abilities in the game, and it was hard to go through and test every single one to find out what was and wasn't considered direct damage. But it's good to put as much, like, put 56 points in here. Anything over that, honestly, if you can't get the rest of the points out of this, the 5%, going an extra 2, 3, 4%, it helps but it doesn't help as much as this other stuff. So we'll get to that in a second. Next up, we have 23 points in a thick skin, and this reduces damage taken from damage over time effects. Not area of effect. Damage over time effects. So poison, bleed, chilled, burning, that's what this reduces. You don't get a lot of this applied to you in PvE. Not too much. But so having some mitigation for it is nice, but you don't need a lot of it. But it is still good to have. Now, in some cases, like halls of fabrication, stuff like that, you will get a lot of this poison applied to you, and in some other things, you get disease applied to you a lot, and in other things, you do get burning applied to you. But honestly, the amount of damage it does isn't enough on a tank to really require you to have a lot of points into this, because of these other two things. Hardy and Elemental Defender. These are your main sources of mitigation from this area. Somebody asked me once, can a tank get 50% damage reduction? Yes. When you use abilities like Northern Storm, Solar Disturbance, things like that, you know, the abilities that give major protection to your group, with that and 8% damage reduction, yes, a tank can get 50% damage reduction. So this is why both of these have 56 points, is because we get another 8% when we cast our Ice Fortress, which allows us 20% incoming damage reduction from physical, poison, disease damage, flame, frost, shock, and magic damage. This is where that 8% stacks. It doesn't stack with thick skin, it doesn't stack with the ironclad. It only stacks with this. So it's really good to have that 8%. And if you're looking for ways of getting that extra 8%, there's a set called Vampire Lord. That'll give you 8% damage reduction. There is another way of getting it, which is the Fighters Guild Circle of Protection, which gives the group 8% damage reduction as long as they're standing in it. A lot of times when you set that, though, they jump out of it thinking it's a trap or something, and it's not. It's a buff. So you need to let your group know you're running Circle of Protections to give them that 8% damage reduction. Especially if they're running like 56 or more into this, because it's going to give them that 8% on top of that. So it's going to give them greater survivability to stay in that circle. And the nice thing is that if you have one person in your group casting it, as long as they keep it a cast in an area that reaches everyone, it can be really effective. Moving on, next we have 40 points in the Bastion. This is to increase the effectiveness of our damage shields. And like I said earlier about this right here, Shimmering Shield is affected by it. So that's one of the reasons why I have it so high, or I have 40 points into it, is Shimmering Shield, but also for Ice Heart and for the Ice Staff heavy attack. Getting all those damage shields helps you mitigate a good portion of the damage, because you are going to be heavy attacking with this build a lot. Not light attacking, not blocking, heavy attacking. The reason you're going to be heavy attacking so much is that's your main return of resources. Waiting on potions when you cast all these different abilities it's kind of a waste. It really is a waste to wait for your potion cooldowns to use it so you can get resources back, so you can recast all these abilities again and wait for, because they don't last. They just don't last. So heavy attacking is going to be big. So having those damage shields there is really important. Next ability, our next one is Quick Recovery. We have 19 points, giving us 5% healing received. If you didn't know, Argonians have a passive that gives them 5% healing received and 5% healing done at the same time. So this healing received applies to their 5%, which makes it 10%. Then you take in the course of heavy armor, which is another 8%. They get an 18% healing received, and then with wearing the Ebon Armory, they get another 4%. All healing received is additive, so they all get added together. So you get just percentage, and it never taper. It doesn't seem to taper off. Like, you can stack as much of it as you want, and it doesn't seem to be like there's any negative reflection against it. It's kind of weird. It's the only one that seems to be that way. And I said seems because it's hard to tell. So moving on, Warlord, 56. The reason we have 56 in here is because tanks break free a lot. They're getting stunned, they're getting uppercutted. There's certain things they can't predict all the time. So having that really good break free, reduced cost is really important. Why is my game doing that? So it's really important to have this at that point. Next up, we have 18 in the bashing focus. This reduces our cost of bash by 11%. So you want to make sure that you have this at about this range, because this just saves you stamina if you got to bash an enemy. So, because most of your stamina is going to be used for dodge rolling. Moving on to the back bar, we have 76 in the tenacity. If you're playing a high elf, I would suggest putting 43 in Arcanist and 43 in the tenacity with it, because that's going to save you resources. But 76 in tenacity, this increases your magic and magic return of fully charged heavy attacks by 14%. It's really good, but 4% you don't notice much of a difference. It's like maybe 200 or 300 more magicka on top of what you normally get. Moving on, 56 in the Shadow Ward. This reduces our block cost by 20%. Since we are using an ice staff, we do get reduced block cost of 33% from the ice staff passive. So if you guys didn't know, like they get ancient knowledge, and down there 36%. So 36% plus 20, that's a 26% reduced cost with all the sturdy gear, the block cost reduction. Blocking with this is almost cost you nothing. And even though you're mostly using magicka, you're only blocking certain abilities. You're not blocking everything. And that takes me into the final part of the tree, the 44 to tumbling, to give us a 17% reduced dodge roll. Now, if you wanted to, you can take this to 16%, so you get a total of 20% reduced dodge roll cost. But I like to have that extra 1% for one reason. It saves me resources. Anytime I can save resources, the better. And so with us having a 21% reduced cost, you can see here, like even with 16,000, it only cost me roughly about maybe almost 3k to dodge roll. So I'm gonna go up to let it max out, and then I'll dodge roll and just show you guys. So it's like almost 3k, like I said, but you get resources back pretty quick, so you can dodge roll quite a few times like this. But remember, the more you dodge roll, the more it's going to cost you. So don't dodge roll too much, because when you get that dodge roll effect on you, it lasts for 3 seconds, so you don't get the regular cost of dodge rolling. So you're not going to be dodge rolling as much. Now, moving on to the blue tree. In the blue tree, now you can set this up how you want. I just prefer it this way. So 43 into Blessed. This increases healing done by 10%. Remember, we're an Argonian, we get another 5%. So that puts us at a 15% healing done on all of our healing, healing done. And then we get that huge 21% or 20-something% healing received, 22%. So we get a massive healing received from any heals we cast on ourselves. And we only have one, really, besides our thoughts, deep thoughts. And our other light and heavy attack thing. Next, we have 56 in Elfborn. This increases critical healing and critical damage done by 20%. We have 43 in Elemental Expert, increasing Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage. As you can see, 10% from Frost. And then with being a Warden, you get another 6%. And if you were a High Elf, you would actually take it up to 20% Frost damage, which is really powerful. No offense, but it is. Oops. So that's kind of why I have that there. Moving on to the middle tree, we have 25 in the Staff Expert, and the reason why, we do a lot of light and heavy attacks. So increasing those by as much as we can is going to be good for us, but it's also going to be good for our group, because that damage output really plays well into it. Now, you don't have to do this. You can take out of here, and you can put it into the, Blessed and the Elfborn. But honestly, I did a lot of testing, guys, and even after with that 4% in there, unless you are an Argonian, the 4% you get from Blessed at being at 81 points into it, not good. Even if you put 100 in it and take it up to the 15%, and you have the extra 5, so you're at 20%, then you're talking something. But 4% really doesn't make a difference. Like, it doesn't. A lot of people say it does, but it really doesn't. So that's why I like this. But But we have 23 in a Master at Arms. This increases your damage done with direct damage attacks by 10%. We do use a lot of direct damage attacks from our light and heavy, so increasing them by a little bit is nice, but I didn't increase them by a whole lot. Moving on, next ability, Thaumaturge. Thaumaturge increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 20%. Now, if you guys didn't know this, like, Twin Slashes is a damage over time ability, but it only applies a damage over time effect. The attack itself is direct damage. The main attack from it is direct damage. So it actually gets boosted damage-wise by this. And then the damage over time by this. So it's kind of nice to have both of these having a decent amount into them. But in this case, Ice Staff, the Wall of Elements isn't a direct damage attack. Only the heavy attack is, and it's better to put into this to give you more out of it with this attaching on. This is a total of 25%. So, but this is nice to boost up those the AoE effect of your Wall of Elements. So that's why I put it there, but you don't really need it if you don't want it. Alright, so moving on, let me go ahead and show you a little bit about how this build works, and I want you to keep close eyes on this thing's health bar underneath it. Whenever you see... Alright, it's going to be a little ice symbol. See that little blue ice symbol there that popped up and it just keeps reapplying? That is chilled. Watch how often that stays up when I face this thing. So first off, when you go to fight an enemy, depending on what it is, like I said, you have your traps. So you can place 3 of these anywhere. So if you know enemies are going to spawn and stuff, you can put them down, and then you can heavy attack this guy, and guess what? You just taunted him for 15 seconds. So you can do that, and then you can run in, you can drop your 2 AoEs, get your shimmering shield up. Of course, you're going to want your back bar buffs. Wall of Elements. Now look how much magicka we just went through, casting all that stuff. Now watch what happens when I heavy attack. I get a total of 4,010 magicka back. So you're going to want to heavy attack as much as you can with this build. The other reason why you're going to want to heavy attack is so you can get that damage shield to proc from the heavy attack, because that's going to mitigate a small chunk of damage every time. If you see the boss is going to do a major AoE attack, you can block. And you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to block only that, and the major hits that are coming in. Now remember, on top of all this other stuff, you're going to be applying weakening like crazy. Now I'm going to hope that this worked. No, it's still not working. But just to show you guys, you guys can see the uptime of some of the stuff, and I wasn't even doing a very good job of it. But if you can get your uptime of Major Ward, Major Resolve to, say, at 80%, that's going to save you a lot. But you also want to make sure that your that your buffs, for some reason, it's not showing me the debuffs. But like your gripping shards, you're going to want to get that up a lot. You want to keep that up there active all the time as much as you can, because that's going to give you the chilled effect when you have these 2 in combination. So when you have the ice thing and you have this going, it's going to give you chilled. And then when you have the Wall of Elements and your heavy attacks, you're going to want to keep these up a lot, because you're going to want to be able to get those charged effects. So the hard thing with this build is keeping the buffs and to keep this applied and this up quite a bit, because you have to heavy attack a lot, like I said. And the more magic, the less magicka you have, the more heavy attacks you have to do. It's not an option of, oh well, I can heavy attack later. It's you have to heavy attack. You have to heavy attack with this build. Even with potions in play, now you've got 30-something seconds, unless you're using all potion play pots that drop the potion cooldown to where you're popping pots constantly. Heavy attack is still the way to go. And you can keep that. You can also keep minor the minor maim, and the other thing, as you can see here, I just got it to proc. As soon as it wears off, it's going to get reapplied. And it's not because of my buffs or anything. It's because I have the weakening on both bars. So you're going to want to keep weakening up And like I said, just keep your heavy attacks going. As long as you can keep a heavy attack going every so many seconds, you're good. And the thing about Ice Staff too, by the way, the reason why it can pull taunt so easy off a sword and board person is because their heavy attack actually hits for more. And it applies a more powerful taunt. So, but that's pretty much how the build works. That's the skills, that's the CP, that's the armor. And if you wanted to, you could use other armor sets with this, but honestly, after doing a lot of thorough testing, Shulks is the best for it. So, Shulks, Evan, and Iceheart are really good. Lord Warden's really good. And another one you can use is Bloodspawn, but Bloodspawn gives you stamina recovery and you don't need it. So it's kind of useless, that extra 2-piece, when you can use Lord Warden, which you get the benefits of both 2-piece and 3-piece, just like with the Iceheart, you get 1-piece and 2-piece benefits. There are other sets you can use if you want, but these are the two that I found to work the best. Lord Warden and Iceheart. So, that's it for this build, guys. This is the Ice Tank. So, I hope you guys like it. If you guys do, hit that like button. It'd be greatly appreciated. If you guys want to see more builds by me or other videos by me, hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day. And this guy might see you in game. Bye.